Hello and welcome to this week's look at action and stunts on film and television. How are you? Thanks for joining me once again. I would like to talk this week, if I may, about the influence of television on us. Bear with. If you weren't already aware, currently the Olympics is taking place in Paris. And it's always one of those occasions whereby people get very excited by sport, particularly those individuals who don't often partake in sport as we would understand it. They might play a bit of football, they might play a bit of golf, they might do walking on a regular basis, but maybe they don't do regular exercise. There will be many, of course, who do on a regular basis and are completely with those individuals taking part as athletes. But this, I spotted that in events like, for instance, the Tour de France, you get situations where people suddenly rush out and get on their bike. You know, they go out there. That happened back in the Olympics a little while ago. It might even have been the London Olympics of 2012, where Chris Hoy was hurtling around the velodrome, and all of a sudden people were rushing out to get bikes and go and do that. They do a similar exercise with tennis, of course. Whenever it's Wimbledon fortnight, well, people start playing a lot more tennis. And similarly, with the sports contained within the Olympics. There are many sports in the Olympics, but only a few of them will pertain to stunt work, and sometimes there is crossover. You see on film many professionals being brought in to perform certain stunts, gags, in connection with movies because they are the very best. All of the stunt performers will have to qualify to be part of a register, as we have here in the UK, or an organisation as they have in other countries, and that will mean that you have to qualify to certain standards. But there are individuals who will, from time to time, be asked to come in and double for an actor, an actress, on the basis of their ability in a particular discipline. And some of those will be at competition level to the point of national, international level. And the Olympics is a great example of that. What I wanted to do is I wanted to run through those sports, Olympic sports, which do have carryover into the qualifications needed to become a stunt performer. And it's not simple. I know we've been through it before, but in this instance we're just going to highlight those individual ones. There are, of course, if you want to get on the stunt register, a huge amount of work, and they are qualifications that are required to instructor level in many situations, 6 disciplines. And once you're on the stunt register, that's just not the end of it. Getting on is complicated enough. Getting work once you're on, well, that's you having to do your networking and getting about and getting involved with those coordinators and going, look, I'm really good at this. This is my thing. Let me show you what I can do. Give me an opportunity. That old saying about you can't get work without experience and you can't get experience without work. Well, that does tend to play here because of the nature of the business. So I thought we'd take a little run through those sports that are Olympic sports and how they cross over into the world of action and film. So let's have a look at some of these qualifications and how they cross over. They work in different categories, right? So the first category, Group A, is fighting. That's the title of the category. And you can qualify for the stunt register in the following martial arts: judo, aikido, wrestling, kung fu, jiu-jitsu, kendo, taekwondo, kickboxing, and boxing. Tai Chi, which is a martial art, is not acceptable on the register. This is a rule that is there for the BSR purposes, and they've made it very clear that that is not an acceptable option. So, from an Olympic sport perspective, we have judo. Judo, of course, absolutely massive as far as fighting is concerned, as far as that close contact is concerned. And if you look at individuals like Rocky Taylor, for instance, one of the very first, him and Doug Robinson, of course, he trained at the Robinsons' Budokwai to get a standard and a training in judo, and of course got to black belt very quickly, which is how he got his first job. So the type of gags that were coming along were lots of fight stuff on film and television, lots of fight stuff, lots of new fight stuff, and judo was very new in the early 60s, and that's how that happened. So judo. Wrestling, grappling, not so much, well, I suppose nowadays it's moved on considerably, but in those early days you'd be looking at, in the days of people who remember Giant Haystacks, Big Daddy, all of those kind of guys. What was the guy? Kendo Nagasaki. He was another guy who would be wrestling on a regular basis on television, and wrestling got a level. It was pushed up. It was something that, was accepted as a sport. But as a spectator sport, then it became big. And of course, consequently, after that, you've got, the WWF or whatever it's called these days, all that sort of stuff. But there are requirements there as far as wrestling is concerned, and that will accept you on. What's the other one on here? Is boxing, of course. Boxing, very clearly an understanding of close contact and of fight routines. Also, the fact with all of these, as far as close combat is concerned, is to, from a realism perspective, if you can take, I did an episode with Rob Parker from the Really 007 team, and boxing on film and boxing for real, two very different types of boxing, but you need to understand one to be able to understand the other. Right, that's massively important. So you'll see a great deal. I watched a terrific fight not too long ago in the Olympics, and it was the women's class, and it was a British girl, and she was fighting a Polish girl. Now, two very, very good boxers in their own right, and under the rules as I understand them, it's points based, right? So the contact is points. And certain parts of the body is points. The English girl knocked down the Polish girl in one of the earlier rounds, and evidently, from what we were seeing, was getting a great deal more of the punching points as far as that was concerned, more so than the Polish girl. And yet there was a split decision. There was a split decision after however many rounds it went, and it was given to the Polish girl, a split decision. Still not sure how that works, still trying to find out. But this is the idea of the whole thing, is that if you are competent at a particular sport, and certainly as we'll find out later on, there needs to be competition information. If you have performed these sports, you've taken part in them at competition level, there needs to be records of that, and that will be in your favour. So there may be many of you who box to stay fit. Maybe it's something that the stunt work or work in film you've considered it in the past, but you've never really put a great deal of thought to it, thinking, well, how can I get around everything else? Well, you're doing the starting thing already. Many boxercise. That's a thing, right? People going to gyms these days, it's not just a standard workout of using weights or, using free weights or using machines. There is boxing as well. Boxing will help you, firstly, with your coordination, your balance, and your timing, and also your footwork. Because in order to throw a decent punch, your feet need to be in the right place. There needs to be balance, so that when you throw that punch, you know exactly where you're going to be after you've thrown the punch, and you're trying to anticipate what that response is going to be from the opponent. So that's the first stage there. And a little reference here, it says boxing, evidence of skill and successful competition is required. So obviously there will be certain levels of competence within each of these sports. They would need to be proved as well. And what I'll do is that in the show notes at the bottom, I will put a link to the BSR, and I'm using the BSR purely from the basis that we are here in Britain. So the British Stunt Register, they have a list of requirements at each of these sports. I will put a contact link in there, and you can go and check that out, and you can check all of those, because there's a possibility that you're doing a number of these already as part of your general fitness regime. If you are considering, or may not have considered, but then you look down the list and go, oh, I do that already, and I do this already. Oh, no, that's not bad. So maybe you want to have a look at that. Okay, up to you. The second category is falling. Falling, massively important, but a majority of this is taken over with trampoline. And not only is it standard trampolining, right? So you need to be able to use the trampoline appropriately. What do I mean by that? I mean that when you are bouncing up and down, you have to accept that there is a resonance from the trampoline itself, which will push you further, push you higher, push you faster, depending on the speed that you hit it at. Now, with that in consideration, you must then work out, as I used to do at school, and later on when I was doing my trampolining qualifications, was that there are routines involved. And we used to do this at school quite often, but the routine is that you do a couple of bounces here, you then have to twist and do a seat drop. So you're in a reverse position, and you're working all this out in your head. And then from that position, you then have to go to another, and then you go to a further position before a dismount. We weren't using bars, but we were using rings later on, which were attached to us with cabling, and then you would do somersaults later on. But that's not the stage that we were at school. But some of you may already be doing this, so it's interesting to look at that. And quite as you will note from the list below, a great many different elements: single back somersaults, single front somersaults, gain back tucked somersaults, and the reverse, the front somersaults, Baranis, which is it's like a somersault with a twist, straight backed, piked, and tucked. Pike, of course, you will know from diving. So all of this to take into consideration, and it's quite extreme. There is a fair list involved there, but it's worth checking out. And have a look at the trampolining. These guys and girls, just remarkable. Their ability in the air and their understanding of positioning. Where am I now? That's the important part. You need to know where you are in midair. We've talked about this from a high fall perspective, but you need to know this from a falling perspective, from trampolining and from diving. If you have an understanding of you're doing 3 or 4 twists and you know exactly where down is and where up is and where you are relative to all of that, well, you're part way there at being able to understand the difficulty of each maneuver, right? So that's a key factor. High diving, let's talk about that. All of the disciplines as far as the stunt register is concerned is from the 10-meter board. Yeah. Now there is springboard and high board diving. Of course, we saw a very good example of that the other day. If you were watching the springboard, this was synchronized. There was two from each country, male and female, were working together to do synchronized dives to hit the pool, hit the water, and I've always found it fascinating that you do all of this work, you enter the water as perfectly straight as possible, which cuts down on the amount of splash. The amount of splash. Look at how much splash is created if you hit the water absolutely straight, arrow straight, and you'll see that from the diving. Now, positioning on the board and knowing where you are is key. There was the Australian female couple the other day who had done very well, and they were in line for a medal. Final dive, and they both coordinated that. You hear them at the start, 1, 2, 3, up, and that's the first bounce. They then create the first bounce, they go up. And what had happened with one of them is, from that upright position, she had moved in the air. So when she comes down for the final push to get off into midair to start the actual movement itself, she's nowhere near the center of that board, only caught the edge of it, which threw her out completely. There's a sight issue as well, because from a peripheral point of view, you can't see where your companion is. And you need that line of sight to be able to level everything off together. So that's where the issue was. They dived, they ended up in separate places. There was lots of splash over here and no splash over there. And as soon as they hit the water, they immediately knew that that medal option had gone. Now, the British pair, of course, all of a sudden were transported up the table into bronze medal position and took the bronze. So it's absolutely essential. Now, the types of dive that will be required in the high diving, of course, is from the 10-meter board. That board that, if you go to swimming pools where they have them, they have the separate diving section, and they have the swimming pools in lanes over that side. It's a perspective thing, you know. You stand there looking up going, yeah, easy, I can do that, no bother. Get me up on that board. Then you go up on the board and you look down and you go, whoa, hang on a second, this is much, much higher than I'd anticipated. And the concept of all of this is very simply explained. If you want to jump off of anything, start small, jump off the curb, jump off a chair, jump off a wall, and at some point your body will go, oh, I think we found our, this is as far as it goes. Now, you then at some point either go, that's me, done, or you go and compensate on that by going, right, well, that's as far as I think I can go. I need to go from here. Let's work on getting from this point to that point. And you work forward and you keep going until you make that breakthrough. And then you do exactly the same to the next level. It's very, very important. The specifications on these include a series of dives with and without clothing. You're not doing it naked, but you're doing it in your swimming costume. You will do a series of moves, and then you will be required to do them in clothes, in a jacket and trousers, in a dress, in whatever. It doesn't matter. But in the line of work that you are training for, very rarely, apart from those given occasions when there is a scene and it is in a swimming pool or a diving pool of some shape or form, very rarely will you be asked to just dive from the board. It might be somewhere where you're falling into water, from a ship, from a cliff, from anything, but you're going to be doing it in clothing. And doing that in clothing is different. Not the taking off, not the falling, the landing. It's once you're in the water. Once you're in the water, as you know yourself from school, you will have been asked on a number of occasions. We did pajamas when I was at school. You may have done the similar sort of thing. Bring pajamas with you, put them on, jump into the water, take them off, tie them up in such a way which creates buoyancy. Now, that's what we used to do with pajamas. You're not going to be asked to create buoyancy there, but you are going to have to understand how difficult it is to do what you're doing with your clothes on. Because air, water gets inside the clothing, it makes it bigger, it billows it out, it makes movement slightly more complicated. So you have to understand that from that point of view. Hence the option with or without clothing. So that's that situation there. The next group is called what is it? It's riding and driving. Now, there are no driving options as far as the Olympics is concerned. Maybe there will be one day. But certainly from our perspective, we're going to be looking at horse riding. And horse riding, as far as the Olympics is concerned, is equestrian, working as three-day eventing predominantly. You'd be looking at the dressage, three-day event, of course, the cross-country, and the show jumping finally. Now, also, apart from being able to ride a horse, and by that you mean you have to go through a certain discipline of moves, but so you have to be able to ride a horse firstly, but you also have to be able to do it with a saddle and without a saddle. That's quite important. Bareback is a very interesting option, which has to go on here as well, because they need to understand how you and the horse work together without having your feet in the stirrups, and being able to create that bond that you will have not only through the reins but also from the feet. And there is also the detailing where you will need to tack the horse, and by that I mean physically put the tack on, put the headgear on, put the bit on, put the reins on, saddle the horse up, that sort of thing. That's important, because again, they will be independent adjudicators working for the BSR members in many cases, but they will be looking to make sure that you have the full composite range available to you. You know what you're doing. That's absolutely essential. So that's that major consideration. The largest out of the lot, quite definitely, is gymnastics. And gymnastics, as it's referred to in the Olympics, is rhythmic gymnastics. I don't know why they call it rhythmic gymnastics, but on the list of sports, it is called rhythmic gymnastics, even though very much there is a rhythmic episode. There's a particular option as far as that's concerned with music, and you're using what is that? Some sort of, I don't even know what it's called, but it's got a bit of thing on it. You know what I mean, don't you? With a stick. And then there's also the one with a ball. You've seen the ball? They do that as well. But this is standard gymnastics that I'm referring to. If there is such a thing as standard gymnastics. It is split into two sections for men and women. There is an additional one for women, because there is, as far as this is concerned, there's an additional discipline. So let me explain it to you. Men, floor exercise, pommel horse, the rings, the vault, the parallel bars, the horizontal bars, the low bar, the high bar, and the mini trampoline. So all of those, and they have a number, so not just within each, but in each of those disciplines, each of those particular areas, you have to show competence and understanding at a number of levels in order to qualify and then go on to the next option, right? The women do all of those plus the beam. The beam as well. I don't know whether there seems to be... Is there more female competitors on beam, or is beam a female-only discipline? Worth looking at. I hadn't checked that out, but that's worth looking at from an Olympics perspective anyway. You see men doing the pommel, but you don't see as many doing the beam, possibly, and that's why that's been added to the women's disciplines. Also in this, from a gymnastic perspective, is rock climbing. Now, there is a sport there in the Olympics which is referred to as sport climbing, Olympic sport climbing, and that's with a rock wall. And it's an indoor activity, and it's a rock wall. Now, also what they're looking for here from a rock climbing perspective, although the two, they may dovetail each other, but what they're looking at here is an understanding of balance, an understanding of discipline from a maneuveral perspective, getting from point A to point B. How do you plan your route, plot your route to get from one to the other? Because this will involve ropes and carabiners. They will have a safety cable from a rock wall point of view, but it's a different discipline. I would imagine that some of these ones from the Olympics is also against the clock. And so that's not what rock climbing is, but it's with the British Rock Climbing Association. They're the independent adjudicators there, and this is specific to the cause. But if you do this sports climbing, it will, be of benefit to you if that's something that you wanted to progress to, because you've already got an ability at it. You've already got an understanding of safety harnesses and balance and planning your route and doing everything that's required from a safety aspect to get you from point A to point B. So again, it's worth considering if that's something that you wanted to do. Group E is water, and that, of course, will be swimming. You do need to prove that you can swim. And I don't just mean, you can do breaststroke. You are going to have to do crawl, breaststroke, and probably butterfly as well, even though, as you know yourself, the most annoying thing in the whole world if you go to the swimming pool is to discover that some bloke's trying to do 30 lengths butterfly, because all he appears to be doing, there's a fine line between butterfly and drowning as far as I'm concerned, and some people don't really separate those two terribly well. But it is important to understand the different disciplines, and similarly with the high dive, you do it in your swimming costume and you do it fully clothed, because that's important. There are also directional options that you will need to go. You and I both know that the simplest way to get from A to B is in a straight line. What part of the requirement is for the swimming discipline as a registered test is to get from A to B to C to D to E. Right? So it will spell out a W. You are swimming in this direction. That will understand your capacity, firstly, from a lung capacity, from a strength capacity, because as we all know, swimming, if you're doing it continually for a period of time, is quite exhausting. So there needs to be an understanding of strength, an understanding of mentality here, because the water could be getting much deeper the further. How many times have you seen people saying, well, I'll just swim from here to there, and they go from here, which is knee-high water, to over there, which is 25 foot deep, and they've never taken into consideration, and they get to that point there, so I'll just put the feet down for a minute and then disappear down under the water. You do see that happening, so there's a lot of information to take in. But again, it seems like one of the most natural things. We all go to the swimming pool, we all swim, but you have to swim in a very, very specific way, and swimming is not just a physical sport, it is an understanding of mental ability as well. You need to know that whatever the depth of the water, whatever the distance you're asked to do, because you will be asked to do it on screen. You will be asked again and again and again to swim from over there to over here, and those two boats are going to have to come past you, and this one's going to have to come, there's going to be wake created from those two boats, and another boat will come over here, and you have to continually swim right the way through shot. There's dialogue happening over here, and you're swimming away in the background. And the light wasn't quite right, so can we do it again? And that could be, 150 meters? That's a long way if you've got to do it over and over and over again if you're not switched on up here. So it's not just physically, it's mentally as well. So that's Group E. And then there is a miscellaneous group. A miscellaneous group for anything that they've not considered. And I'll read the notes here. It says you can only have one qualification in this category of miscellaneous, and it involves having an exceptional talent or skill, e.g. Olympic or national champion. So let's say for a moment that you are, you're a world champion BMX rider, let's say. World champion BMX rider. Oh, okay. Well, on the strength of that, that will accept you in. You are the national hang gliding champion. Oh, that'll accept you in as well, in that category. So that can be used as one of your other categories. Many will have used motorcycling, competition racing, so they will have done that. Maybe rally driving, you know. So all of this taken into consideration, there is an exceptional skill. I don't think table tennis will cut it, if I'm perfectly honest. If you're very happy with a good ping or a decent pong, I don't think that's going to qualify you in exceptional circumstances. So you will have to look at the long game here, but I'm suspecting, based on the nature of the job, that is something to take into consideration. So when you look at these sports, and when you go, that'd be great. Well, I'll tell you what, we've seen the cycling. Let's go out on our bikes and make this a regular thing. Let's every day do a couple of miles. And I mean go out on the road. I don't mean, have a bike with the power pack on it doing the thing. No, I'm not referring to that at all. I mean going out and cycling. And if you decide, right, I'm going to do this, super. If you see the athletics, as many of us do, we see the athletics, we see the spectacular situations that they get themselves into, and the wonderful records that are broken, and new names that you've never heard before from countries that you're still not quite certain of where they are. They are performing to the very height, the very top of their ability. And you go, oh, I remember so-and-so from Future. And then from the Olympics, you suddenly find them later on in competition, in other competitions around the world, whether it be the 1,500 meters, a marathon, a 3,000 meters, whatever it is. You remember them. And a lot of people will go out and do a 5K. Or what was the thing? Jenny Falconer. How many of you know Jenny Falconer? I'm a big fan of hers, always have been, for a number of reasons. But nowadays, of course, she does a thing called Run Pod. If you've never heard Run Pod, I'll put a link down there. You can go and check that out. She is a fabulous runner. She enjoys running. She does it for fitness. She does it for mental well-being. But she also has, on the podcast, she will get somebody on and talk to them about their ability to work better through life with running, right? And there is a thing called, is it Couch to 5K or something like that, where people will go, look, I've never considered it before, but actually having watched this, I think I might want to do something. Then there are training plans put in place. You don't suddenly rush out and run 5K, not unless you've got your own St. John's ambulance team with you. But you do it in stages. You'll do, I don't know, a couple of 100 yards, 1,500 meters, whatever you want to do. But you break it down into small sections, and then over time you build on that. And you get a lot of people doing that. You see them out. There are always more joggers in the street after an Olympics than you see any other time. For me, any other time of the year. The London Marathon is one occasion where you see lots of additional joggers because they're all in training. And now everybody is doing a half marathon, a 5K, a 10K, you know. People that you look out the street going, how on earth does that guy walk from there to there without having a cardiac arrest? And the next thing, they're doing a 10K, you know, because in here they can overcome everything. And they do it their way. So there's a great example, another great example of, you know, being able to promote yourself physically along the way. And it's occasions like sporting events like this that will do that, definitely. And I sincerely hope that you enjoy the rest of it. We've got a few more weeks now. The athletics, I don't think, starts till next week. So if you are feeling the urge to go and do something like that, well, prep ahead. And take heed of the expectations of what's needed to get you to the very highest level, but particularly in the area of stunt work. If that is something that you would like to do, and you're a fan of this sport, and you think, well, maybe I could go and do something like that, or maybe I can get some qualifications to keep me going, it's certainly worth checking out. The list will be in the show notes at the bottom there. Click that, it will give you all of those details. And the BSR will provide further details about, go and check it out from your local leisure centres and places of this nature, if that's the next stage that you want to do. Ultimately, when tests are taken, if you've got serious enough to start doing everything you need to do, then you must contact, there are certain centres, I know certainly based in the south London area and that sort of, they will be certain specific areas where stunt tests will take place, and I dare say there will be a fair amount of commuting to get you from A to B, but there is certainly requirements that can be done in your local leisure centre, I dare say. So go and check it out. It's certainly worth considering. And until next time, we will bid you a fond adieu. Bye for now.